I think, John Roberts is really poised to pull down the curtain on, civil rights era legislation with the Voting Rights Act. I mean, for those who aren't aware of what happened, yesterday the Supreme Court was considered the oral arguments over whether or not it was still constitutional for the federal government to subject local election laws in various jurisdictions, mostly in the South, to preclearance, which basically means that these jurisdictions have to ask the Justice Department for permission to change their election laws so that the Justice Department can make sure they're not discriminating against people on the basis of race, that they're not purposefully, or that they wouldn't have the effect of discriminating on the basis of race. And I think Roberts comes into the Reagan administration as a young attorney, and he's right in the middle of the battle over the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act, and this is 30 years ago. This is 1982. And he loses that battle in Congress. I mean, the Reagan administration loses that battle. I won't go too deep into it. Basically, they wanted a standard for the part of the Voting Rights Act that covers the entire country. They wanted a weaker standard that said, unintentional discrimination would not be covered under the Voting Rights Act. And now he's Chief Justice, and it's sort of, basically he's going to, I think, declare, and I think Jeffrey Toobin had a column on this. He's basically pulling the curtain down on this, on those heavy-handed federal efforts to ensure equality. One of the major ones, he's going to say, this is over. And I think I feel I don't know. I've been ranting for a minute. I feel sort of very angry and strongly about that. Yeah. But I want to hear what you thought. Particularly listening to some of the things that came out of the hearing. Some of the more famous statements, of course, Scalia calling the Voting Rights Act a racial entitlement. Yeah. Yeah,
I told you that I cringed at that right. Choice of words.
I think a lot of people cringed. I think it wasn't just. I mean, I don't think you were an exception on the conservative side either.
I think that Scalia. I mean, I'm a huge admirer of Scalia's, unapologetically so. But I think that he's a much more careful writer than he. I guess I'm a fan of Scalia on text as opposed to because he pulls a lot of this stuff. He's trying to be funny or provocative or whatever, and he owns some of the more outrageous comments and orals in history. There is a kernel of something in his choice of words that gets at what I think conservatives are uncomfortable with the Voting Rights Act. I just say, as a historian of the Constitution, I'm not a historian of the Constitution. As an amateur historian of the Constitution, somebody who's interested in the Constitution, the way that conservatives and liberals and different judicial philosophies talk about it. What's interesting to me, and you even used the phrase yourself just now, is this still constitutional? Now you could maybe what you meant by that was, do 5 members of the Supreme Court still think it's constitutional? But I think there's something else weird going on here, which is kind of what I was alluding to before, is that the post-slavery, post-emancipation history of race relations and civil rights in this country is so uniquely problematic and rife with challenges that it is as it were, a singular case, a special case when it comes to everything from the scope and role of the federal government to constitutional law. So when I hear, is it still constitutional? What I interpret that to mean is that relationship still so fraught with peril that these extraordinary measures are required? And that's a weird thing to me as somebody who's very much a dead Constitution guy as opposed to a living one. There is this element of historicity, to use another $5 word, in all of this talk, because to me that's the central question. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't formed an opinion on it, and you always got to be careful with stuff like this because it's such a sensitive topic. But you want to be able to say that someday this will be more discriminatory to jurisdictions in the South than it is to African Americans in this country. You want to be able to say that there will be some progress. Maybe it's 100 years from now. Maybe it was 10 years ago. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have a strong opinion. But certainly you want to be able to say in the abstract that there will come a time that the impositions placed on only certain jurisdictions in the southern part of this country do more harm than good. I mean, would you not agree with that?
Well, in the sense that you want there to be a time when it's no longer needed, right?
Yes.
So this is part of my frustration, right? Is that I think on some like instinctual level, it bothers me that Goldwater who ran on opposition. It's like Roberts is a product of Goldwater. Like you can draw a direct line from Goldwater to Reagan to Roberts. Like that stream runs in one direction, and Goldwater comes out and he runs on opposition to civil rights legislation, and there's just an instinctive part of me that says John Roberts doesn't get to say when this is over, because he is a product of this movement that was on the wrong side of history when this stuff was being done. And that's just, apart from the actual, merits arguments about this, that is like a very strong emotional feeling.